The first thing I felt was the shock of cold water. It stole my breath, a brutal and familiar slap of reality. One moment I was sinking into the dark, crushing depths of the ocean, my sister's maniacal laughter the last sound I heard. The next I was gasping, sputtering, knee-deep in the ornamental fountain at the edge of our schoolyard. My name is Alara. And I had been reborn on the very day it all began. The water dripped from my hair, plastering my school uniform to my skin. My heart wasn't pounding from the cold, but from the sheer, disorienting weight of memory. I had lived this day before. I had lived a whole life after this day, a life of power, of control, of a gilded cage, and finally, of betrayal and a cold, drowning death. My twin sister, Serafina, was already rushing away from me, her bag swinging, her focus laser-sharp on the commotion near the old oak tree. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. It was the day the new boy Kalen was being bullied. He was the unacknowledged, illegitimate son of Alistair Vance, the business tycoon who ruled over Oceancrest City. In our first life I was the one who rushed to his aid. I was the one who fought off the spoiled rich kids, who helped him to the infirmary, who started the chain of events that bound our fates together. But not this time. I watched Serafina shove her way into the crowd, her voice ringing with false bravery. "Get away from him, you cowards." A calm, cold smile touched my lips as I climbed out of the fountain. I let the water drip, a baptism into my new existence. I let her go. Without my unwavering support, without the cunning and strategy one had provided, Kalen was nothing more than a deranged demon in the making. Let her have him. My mind drifted back to my death. It was supposed to be the brightest year of my life. I had finally, after years of meticulous planning and ruthless maneuvering, inherited the entire Vance fortune. I was free. I was powerful. I stood on the deck of my yacht, the wind in my hair, the world at my feet. And Serafina, my dear, sweet, jealous twin, couldn't bear it. She waited for the moment I was lost in thought, then pushed me over the railing. She even jumped in after me, a performative act of heroism for the crew watching. But underwater her mask slipped. Her hands, strong from years of practicing in pools, seized my hair and forced me under. I remembered the burn of salt water in my nose and throat, the metallic taste of my own despair. She wasn't satisfied with a quiet death. She yanked me up, her face a twisted mask of glee, laughing like a fiend from hell. "We're twins," she had screamed over the waves. "Why do you get to marry into wealth while I'm stuck with a gambling, abusive drunk, living in misery and shame? If I had been the one to save Kalen, I would have been the one to rise in fortune. Why should you get it all? You stole everything from me. I practiced swimming for years for this. Now die." Ha ha. Even as I drowned, my thoughts were clear. I had never wronged her. I had given her money, protected her from the consequences of her own bad choices. But it was never enough. The rage and despair were a fire in my chest that even the cold ocean couldn't extinguish. I let myself sink, a silent surrender. But Serafina, in her triumphant fury, didn't understand the treachery of ocean currents. Exhausted, she was dragged down with me into the dark. The sound of distant, arrogant curses yanked me back to the present. Serafina and I had been walking into the schoolyard where it all began. I had held back the reckless urge to rush in and save Kalen. Instead, I turned to look at my sister. Her pupils were dilated, her chest heaving. Though she was grinning, tears streamed down her cheeks. She wiped her face roughly, then shoved me into the fountain without a second thought, her expression as dark and cold as the deep sea. "This time," she spat, her voice low and venomous, "I won't repeat my mistakes." Then she was gone, charging toward the crowd. I climbed out, shaking the water from my clothes, and watched the spectacle. Serafina wrapped her arms around Kalen's bleeding head, shielding him like a mother hen. The ringleader, a spoiled brat named Jackson, kicked her viciously. "Serafina, have you lost your damn mind protecting this bastard?" Her face was a twisted canvas of madness and exhilaration. "Listen to me," she screamed. "His name is Kalen. From today on, if any of you dare lay a hand on him, I'll fight you to the death." Her crazed defiance startled the bullies into silence. A crack appeared in her fierce expression as she looked down at Kalen, half-conscious in her arms. She softened her voice, a poor imitation of tenderness. "Kalen, I'm sorry. I only did it because they forced me. From now on, I'll protect you. I won't let anyone hurt you again. Come on, I'll take you to the infirmary. From beginning to end, Kaylin's face was unreadable, as empty as a puppet's. How ironic. My selfish, power-hungry sister, shielding the demon prince with such devotion. As she carried the weakened Kaylin away, she brushed past me. A mocking smirk tugged at her lips as she leaned close to my ear, her whisper filled with twisted pride. Elara, this time I'll pay you back double for all the suffering I endured in my last life. I watched them leave with cold indifference. In the past, one of them had crushed my hopes while the other stole my life. Did they really think that just because I had been reborn I would ever let them go? The whole day, Serafina circled Kaylin like a cat with its fur on end. She fetched his lunch, bought him drinks between classes, and fussed over him with fake concern. She even insisted on walking him home after school, no doubt to play the saint for his unstable mother. By the time she finally returned home, the dinner our parents had been waiting to share with her had gone cold. The moment she stepped through the door, she couldn't contain her excitement. Mom, Dad, you'll never believe it. I saved the son of the wealthiest man in Ocean Crest. Our mother, Lyra, hurried to the kitchen to reheat the dishes, her face alight with curiosity. Serafina toyed proudly with half of a jade pendant, the token Kaylin's mother had given him as proof of his identity. His name is Kaylin Vance. Once he returns to the Vance family and marries me, you'll be his in-laws. We'll never run out of money for the rest of our lives. Lyra beamed as she set a bowl of soup in front of Serafina. Oh my goodness, really? Our Serafina truly is blessed. Did you hear that, Orion? From now on we'll live in comfort thanks to her. My father, Orion, froze mid-bite, his eyes wide. The Vance family? You mean the one that lives in the penthouse of the Ethelstan Tower? Serafina nodded proudly. That's right. But even so, once Kaylin goes back, his monthly allowance alone would be enough to buy you a luxury villa. Orion's eyes nearly popped out of his head. A villa? I've never even dared to dream of that in this lifetime. Serafina, you've really brought honor to our family. I've heard the villas at Crestview are the best. Tomorrow I'll go take a look and choose the finest one. Gnawing on a chicken leg, Serafina patted her chest confidently. Go ahead, pick whatever you want. Don't hold back. My parents' faces glowed with avarice. My mother kept piling food into Serafina's bowl. Serafina, you know our neighbor Mrs. Croft? Her daughter bought her a gold bracelet. She waves it around in front of me every single day. So annoying. Serafina slapped the table. Mom, once I marry into the Vance family, I'll buy the entire jewelry store for you. You can wear so much gold it blinds their eyes. Lyra clapped her hands in delight. Perfect. That'll put that old hag in her place. They were already dreaming of riches before anything had been set in stone. The Vance family's money was not so easily spent, especially by outsiders like them. Families of that stature valued return on investment above all. Kaylin was just an illegitimate child. Without powerful backing to help the Vances expand their empire, he was worthless. And illegitimate children like him weren't rare. There were at least half a dozen. But my family was truly overjoyed. I lowered my head, quietly eating my rice, not wanting to ruin their illusions. Suddenly, my mother slapped the chopsticks right out of my hand. Eat, eat, eat. That's all you ever do? Your sister has done so much for this family. And what about you? Can't you even say a single decent word? Serafina arched her brows, her lips curving with mockery. Elara, I'm about to marry into wealth. Aren't you happy for me? Both of my parents glared at me with disappointment, waiting for my response. I took a deep breath and forced a sincere smile. Of course I'm happy for you, Serafina. No one could be happier than me to see you with Kaylin. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But being the wife of a powerful man isn't as easy as you think. Shut up. Serafina's face twisted instantly, cutting me off. That's none of your business. All you need to remember is to stay far away from Kaylin. Don't even think of having ideas about him. My advice, meant as a genuine warning, was seen as nothing but jealousy. I forced a meek smile. As you wish. As long as you two don't provoke me, I'll stay far, far away from you. Serafina suddenly leaned in close, her voice low and sharp, a deadly promise. Elara, you'd better remember your words. If you dare ruin my future, I'll destroy you again. The venom in her whisper was so real, so present, it was as if the ocean water was still in my lungs. She thought she had won. She thought she had seized the prize. But she had no idea what she was truly embracing or what I was now capable of. The game had just begun and this time I was playing for keeps. Serafina couldn't wait to drag Kaelin to the Vance estate to be recognized. But instead of meeting the old patriarch Alistair Vance, she was thrown out by his legitimate son, a man I knew from my past life to be as ruthless as he was arrogant. Undeterred and with no interest in studying, she skipped classes for days, earning repeated warnings from her teachers that she blithely ignored. Out of options, my sister finally chose the nuclear option. She exposed Kaelin's identity online. The revelation exploded like wildfire across social media. I laughed at her stupidity, a cold, silent sound in the privacy of my room. By doing this, she hadn't secured Kaelin's future. She had shredded the Vance family's dignity into pieces and thrown it onto a burning skillet. Even if the patriarch caved under public pressure and took Kaelin back, I wouldn't need to lift a finger. They would be forced to live in fear, walking on thin ice, bound to destroy themselves from within. Soon Serafina and Kaelin became the hottest topic in school. The bullies who had once tormented him now rushed to apologize and cozy up to him. And Serafina, playing the role of fierce protector with gusto, didn't hesitate to rough them up, her actions a performance solely for Kaelin's benefit. One afternoon, as I carried my lunchbox to the cafeteria with a friend, Serafina blocked my path, her face brimming with a pride so potent it was almost tangible. "Mr. Vance has already acknowledged Kaelin as his son," she boasted, her chest puffed out. "He's now the distinguished young master of the Vance family. Mr. Vance even promised that once we graduate he'll host our engagement banquet. So soon you're calling him Dad, huh?" I said lightly, offering my congratulations. "Then I wish you both a long and happy life together and may you have many children." Serafina smirked, a predatory glint in her eye. "Sister, I've officially told you now. To avoid unnecessary trouble, you won't be invited to the engagement banquet." I smiled as if relieved. "That's exactly what I want." Just then Kaelin appeared, following Serafina's trail. His eyes, narrowed and sharp, found me instantly. They were no longer the eyes of the awkward, bullied boy from high school. They were the eyes of a predator, unrestrained, calculating, and cold. His gaze swept over me in a single comprehensive glance, and it felt like being ensnared by a demon. The blood in my veins froze solid. This was no longer the Kaelin I remembered from the beginning of our first life. This was the Kaelin after 13 years in the Vance family, a dangerous, deranged young master. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing my breath. He had been reborn. He curved his lips into a faint, deceptively harmless smile. "You're Serafina's sister?" he asked, his voice a soft caress that belied the menace in his eyes. But the terror from my past life clawed at me, a visceral memory of his frenzied rage and cold cruelty. My nails dug into my palm until I felt the skin break and blood ooze through. I had to force myself to remain still, to not flinch away. Serafina instantly spun him around so his back faced me, her expression dark with undisguised malice. "You know I'm engaged to Kaelin, yet you're trying to seduce him. How shameless can you be? Remember what you said? Stay far away from us." I stared at her as if she were a fool. I had no idea what part of her delusion made her believe I was trying to seduce him. I was trying to survive him. Dragging Kaelin away, Serafina warned him as they walked. "Don't be fooled by my sister's looks. She's rotten to the core. That day when I tried to save you, she tried to stop me. That's why I pushed her into the fountain." She then giggled, a sound that grated on my nerves. "But honestly, she's kind of amusing. Next time let's include her too." They were long gone before I finally absorbed the full, chilling truth. Kaelin had been reborn as well. In his last life, when he was nothing but an illegitimate child, he had endured humiliation and lived quietly, submitting to others. But now, as the reborn young master of the Vance family, he had the advantage of foresight and countless opportunities to secure his place. He would never forget his eventual downfall and death in the last life, a downfall I had engineered. He would never forgive me. His revenge was inevitable. I had to come up with a plan, and quickly. That evening when I returned home, I found Serafina sobbing dramatically on the couch as our mother comforted her. The atmosphere was thick with accusation. Without warning, my father swung a mop handle at the back of my knees. "I'll destroy you, you disgrace of a daughter." The stick cracked with a sharp snap, and a searing pain shot through my body like lightning. Cold sweat drenched my skin as I collapsed to the floor with a thud. Dad, I gasped, the pain making my vision swim. Why are you hitting me? I gritted my teeth, holding back tears, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Serafina's lips curved into a satisfied smile from over our mother's shoulder. My mother stood up from the sofa, her face blazing with righteous anger. How dare you show your face? You knew your sister is going to marry Kaylin, and yet you still tried to seduce him. If you don't have the ability to marry into a wealthy family yourself, you try to steal your sister's man. How did I ever give birth to such a shameless child? Without a word, my father swung the broken half of the mop handle down hard on my back. Keep talking back and I'll beat you to death. I let out a muffled groan, forcing myself to stay stubborn. I didn't. I said I didn't. And that's the truth. I couldn't care less about marrying into the Vance family. Not everyone wants that life. My mother sneered, her face a mask of contempt. If you don't care, then look in the mirror and ask yourself if you even have the ability. Tomorrow your father and I will transfer you to another school. I won't just sit here and watch you ruin your sister's happiness. Her words froze me in shock. Transfer schools? That wasn't possible. There were only 2 months left before the college entrance exams. In my last life, I had been so distracted by Kaylin's return to the Vance family that I couldn't focus on my studies, and I ended up at a second-rate university. This time I had to give it my all. Being forced to transfer now would ruin everything. I can't transfer, I said firmly, pushing myself up on my elbows. The exams are too close. Then don't go at all, my father barked, his face purple with rage. What's the point of a girl studying so much? You'd be better off finding a rich man to marry, just like your sister. I couldn't hold back anymore. The injustice of it all, the constant dismissal, rose like a tide within me. My nose stung and tears spilled down my face. Dad, Mom, I'm your daughter too. Why can't you think about me just once? My mother snorted coldly. Compared to your sister marrying into wealth, your education is worthless. Something inside me crumbled then. Because I was the elder sister, they had always taught me to yield to Serafina. So I gave up toys, gave up their attention, never cried, never threw tantrums. Over time, they came to see me as dull and unlikable, while Serafina's calculated sweetness and coquettishness made her their darling. Every time she cried, they pushed all the blame on me, scolding me, beating me, never caring about the truth. I felt like a punctured balloon collapsing in defeat. With a dead heart, I whispered, "Fine. Better to leave this house where Serafina targeted me and my parents crushed me, and instead throw myself into my studies with 10 times the effort." I dragged my aching body to stand, but my mother grabbed my arm, her voice cold and final. "Kaylin will be coming to the house in a few days. Since your sister doesn't want you anywhere near him, don't come home. Go rent a place to live." I shook her hand off, didn't even raise my head, and rasped, "Fine." So this time Kaylin could never use my parents to control me again. I was cutting the strings before he could even pick them up. In my last life, after the college entrance exams, I had been the one to personally take Kaylin to be recognized by the Vance family. He never went to college. Instead, he started at the very bottom of the Vance Corporation, grinding for 3 years before finally getting a chance to prove himself. At that time, I was in my junior year of college, fresh off winning an international debate championship that made national headlines. I had even received an early offer from the company of my dreams. My future was bright and I was overjoyed. But Kaylin came to me with $300,000 in cash, asking me to help him secure a $50 billion contract. With that, he could stand tall before the old patriarch. I was still just a student, unwilling to get involved in their family power struggles. So I refused outright. 2 days later, my parents came to me crying, begging for my help because Kaylin had accused Serafina of stealing his $300,000 and she was facing prison. At that time, that foolish Serafina was off traveling the world with her delinquent boyfriend, spending the money recklessly. It was obvious Kaylin had set this trap to force me into helping him while also taking revenge for the bullying he had suffered in high school. If I didn't agree, his next move would be to destroy my parents. Backed into a corner, I finally agreed. He handed me a stack of documents and I studied them for 2 days straight. Sure enough, in the final negotiation I helped him secure that massive project. Kaylin finally raised his head with pride in the Vance family, and that was also the beginning of my nightmare. Not long after, Kaylin brought a bride price of $1 million to my parents, demanding they hand me over. Within a month, my parents were dazzled by the money. Not only did they forget how Kaylin had once threatened Serafina, they groveled at his feet, shameless in their flattery. Serafina, however, seethed with jealousy and hatred, convinced that Kaylin wanted to marry me only to repay me for taking him to the Vance family in high school. They didn't even bother to ask what had happened between Kaylin and me or whether I was willing. Instead, they pressured me with threats of death, forcing me to drop out of school. My heart burned with resentment, but under the weight of power and their so-called morality, I had no choice but to bow my head. My parents cheerfully tied me up and delivered me to Kaylin. That night, his eyes were bloodshot, and like a frenzied beast, he unleashed all his cruelty on me, shattering my dignity and my future in an instant. My dreams and my future were destroyed in an instant. I shook my head, brushing aside the bitter memories. Ignoring the fiery pain radiating from my back and knees, I packed my bags. Kaylin would never let me go, and Serafina would never stop at simply driving me out of the house. I had to move faster. My parents, true to their word, rushed to arrange my transfer to a school in a remote suburb, a place where as long as you paid you could enroll. The environment was abysmal. They rented me a shabby single room for a pittance and turned their backs without a second glance. I didn't care about the pain coursing through my body. I had a mission. Dropping my luggage, I spent 2 hours on a series of buses before arriving at the underground parking lot of the Ethelstan building. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I watched, hidden behind a concrete pillar, until I saw him. Donovan Creed. The old fox himself, Alistair Vance's most powerful rival. He was just as I remembered from my past life. Sharp, cautious, and radiating an aura of controlled power. Catching the moment when his secretary opened the car door for him, I slipped inside with lightning speed, sat down, and called out with a sweetness I didn't feel, "Hello, Uncle Donovan." Donovan Creed frowned and stepped back. His secretary immediately reached for his phone to call the police. The old fox was still as cautious as ever. "Uncle Donovan, don't be alarmed," I said smoothly, keeping my hands visible. "The Vance family may be leading in the new energy project now, but your corporation was supposed to have the greater advantage. Yet lately your bids have been crushed. Don't you want to know why?" Donovan Creed's brows eased slightly. He raised a hand, stopping the secretary from dialing. "Oh, what do you know? Tell Uncle and I'll buy you candy." His tone was patronizing, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. I crooked my finger at him to come closer and smiled. "I'm here to prove my worth. There's no need to be nervous, Uncle Donovan. After all, I'm just a helpless girl. I couldn't hurt you even if I wanted to." He looked around wearily, then finally climbed into the car, the door still open. I took his hand, ignoring his instinctive flinch, and wrote a name in his palm. "This is the mole the Vance family planted inside your company. You're a smart man. Check it out and you'll know if it's true." His fists clenched tight, and in an instant his eyes pierced into me, all pretense of amusement gone. "And what do you want from me?" I sobered, meeting his gaze directly. "Seriously. I ask that from today on, you assign people to protect me until I graduate college." Donovan Creed chuckled, though his expression remained sharp, calculating. 4 years of college sounds like a loss-making deal. Why should I invest so much in you? I leaned in, holding his steely gaze without flinching. "Because within 4 years, I'll help you completely replace the Vance family and become the ruler of Ocean Crest." Donovan Creed's smile disappeared. His face grew solemn. "So young, not even graduated high school yet, and already talking so big," he said, his tone mocking but his eyes intrigued. I raised my brows, a faint, confident smile on my lips. "And my abilities aren't small either." With that, I stepped out of the car, casually giving him the address of my rental before walking away, my legs trembling not from pain, but from the adrenaline of the gamble. I could feel his eyes on my back, watching me quietly for a few seconds, as if weighing the worth of this strange, bold girl. "If this person's identity turns out to be exactly as you say," his voice carried across the parking lot, "a promise and a threat, I'll consider sending people to protect you." As his car drove out of sight, I exhaled heavily, the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding shuddering out of me. The pain that had dulled earlier surged back through every nerve. In my previous life, Donovan Creed had been my strongest opponent. To defeat him, I had dug up every scrap of information about him. That man truly was a mole planted by the Vance family. Though in the end, Donovan had discovered him on his own. All I had done this time was point him in the right direction 2 months earlier. It was a start. A fragile, dangerous alliance had been proposed. Now I had to wait and see if the old fox would take the bait. My survival depended on it. The pain was a constant throbbing companion as I hobbled away from the Ethelstan building. I stopped by a small, dimly lit clinic, the kind that asked no questions, and bought the strongest analgesic ointment I could get without a prescription. The pharmacist gave my bruised face and stiff posture a pitying look, but I just shook my head slightly, took my purchase and left without a word. My new home was in a part of the city that time had forgotten. The buildings were stained with grime and the air smelled of stale grease and neglect. The room my parents had rented for me was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. A single box-like space with a narrow bed, a rickety table, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. It was profoundly lonely, but for the first time it was mine. And it was safe from my family. I went to the new school for 2 days. It was worse than I had imagined. The classrooms were a circus of chaos. Students shouted over the teachers, who looked defeated and exhausted, their voices mere whispers against the tide of apathy. There was no learning here, only a holding cell for those waiting to age out of the system. On the 3rd day I made a decision. I went to the administration office, claimed I had a chronic illness flaring up, and secured a leave of absence to study from home. Fortunately, the formal curriculum had finished 2 months ago. This stage was all about revision. I could do that better in the silence of my shabby room than in that den of noise. One day, an old classmate from my previous school, a kind girl named Liana who had always been neutral in the war between Serafina and me, sent me the final mock exam paper. In her message she mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Serafina and Kaylin had completely stopped attending school. Of course they had. Kaylin, with his foreknowledge of the Vance family's upcoming projects, knew exactly which levers to pull to prove his worth to the old patriarch. He was desperate to avoid starting again as a lowly employee, to seize power immediately. And Serafina, his self-appointed guardian and future bride, was clinging to his side, playing the role of supportive partner. That worked in my favor. At least he was too busy to focus his predatory gaze on me. A few days after my meeting with Donovan Creed, as I was heading out to a print shop with my phone to print Liana's mock exam, a primal alarm bell went off in my head. I was being followed. My chest tightened, the old fear surging back. I didn't dare lead whoever it was back to my rental. Dragging my still-injured leg, I tried to quicken my pace, aiming for the main road where there would be people and traffic. But under the blazing afternoon sun, the long, narrow alley that connected my street to the busier avenue was utterly deserted. The print shop was just on the other side. I opened my mouth to scream, but before a sound could escape, a rough, calloused hand clamped over my lips from behind, and a powerful arm dragged me into a filth-strewn side alley. My heart pounded wildly, blood roaring in my ears like a tidal wave. I struggled with everything I had, my injured leg screaming in protest, but his grip was like iron. When he spun me around and pinned me against the damp brick wall, despair swallowed me whole. I knew that face. It was branded into my memory from a life I had already lived. Zachary. Serafina's husband from my past life. A gambling, abusive drunk whose presence was a constant stain on her existence. In that other timeline she had constantly whined about him, using his abuse as a justification for her own misery and her jealousy of me. He pinned my wrists with one hand and braced my legs with his own, his body pressing me hard against the unyielding wall. I struggled, choking out fragmented cries for help between his stifling grip. "Go ahead, scream," he sneered, his breath reeking of cheap alcohol and decay. "The louder you cry, the more excited I get. Even if you scream your throat raw, no one's coming to save you in this dump." He laughed, a low, ugly sound. "From now on, little beauty, you'll belong to me. I'll take good care of you." So this was Serafina's idea of revenge. She couldn't beat me in a battle of wits, so she had resorted to this. Using this filthy, deranged man to defile me, to shatter my spirit, to ruin my chances at the college entrance exams, and trap me in a life of shame and violence, just like the one she had complained about so bitterly. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical cut. Zachary didn't even have time to turn around. One of the men, built like a professional wrestler with a tapestry of tattoos covering his massive arms, grabbed Zachary by the scruff of his neck with a single hand and lifted him off me as if he were a stray kitten. The other man, his face a stone mask, swung his fist twice into Zachary's face with sickening, precise thuds. There was no fight. There was only instantaneous, brutal incapacitation. Zachary crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he could even process what was happening. The two men moved with an efficiency that was terrifying. They stripped Zachary bare right there in the alley, their movements devoid of any emotion. One of them handed me Zachary's clothes, a silent, grim offering. Then they picked up his limp, naked body and tossed it unceremoniously into a dumpster at the end of the alley like a sack of garbage. They turned to me, standing like silent, mountainous sentinels on either side. The one who had thrown the punches handed me a brand new, unopened smartphone. "Mr. Creed sent us," he said, his voice a low rumble. The mole checked out. Relief so profound it made my knees weak washed over me. Donovan Creed had accepted my offer. The alliance was sealed. I took the phone, my hands shaking. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice hoarse. As repayment and retaliation, I immediately opened the new phone, found Donovan's pre-programmed number, and sent him a name and an address. It was one of Alistair Vance's other illegitimate sons, a young man living in precarious anonymity a few cities over. I knew where they all were. In my first life I had been the one to find them, to use them as pawns against Kalen. Now I would use them as a shield. Let's see how you like it, Kalen, when your brothers start appearing on the stage sooner than you expected. With my two guardians shadowing me, their presence a palpable, comforting force a few paces behind, I made it safely to the print shop and back to my rental. The rest of the days leading up to the exams passed in a blur of intense, focused study. The fear was still there, a constant, low hum in the background, but it was now manageable. I was no longer a lone, wounded animal. I had protectors. I had a plan. The day the college entrance exam results were released, I sat on my narrow bed, the new phone in my hand. I logged into the portal, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. 738 points. Ranked first in all of Oceancrest in the sciences. A sob caught in my throat, but it was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. I had done it. I had surpassed my previous life score. The doors to the university of my dreams, to a future built on my own merit, were swinging wide open. I had barely processed the number when the phone rang. It was Liana, her voice squealing with excitement. "Alara. The news fans. They're looking for the top scorer. They're going to your parents' house." I hadn't thought that far ahead. I hadn't considered the publicity. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. My parents. Serafina. They would see this. They would. Sure enough, within an hour there was a pounding on my door. I opened it to find a small horde of reporters and cameras, their lenses pointed at me and the shocking squalor of my surroundings. When they saw the conditions I lived in, the peeling paint, the single bare bulb, the pathetic little bed, their shock was genuine. One reporter, a woman with kind eyes, was visibly moved to tears. In the live stream that was already running, people in the comments were calling me an orphan, a rags to riches heroine. Cornered, with the cameras rolling, I had no choice but to explain. I didn't embellish. I simply told the truth. I spoke calmly about my sister's engagement to the son of a wealthy family, about my parents' decision to focus all their resources and hopes on her, and about their subsequent decision to send me away to this place so I wouldn't interfere. I didn't mention Kalen or the Vances by name, but the implications were clear. The story exploded. My video spread across every short video platform like wildfire. For a time, the scandal of the top scorer cast out by her family eclipsed even the ongoing gossip about the Vance family's illegitimate children. That night, two major things happened. First, my parents called. My father's voice was a screech of pure fury down the line. "You ungrateful wretch. Someone threw rotten eggs at your mother at the market. They're cursing us in the street. You've ruined our reputation." Second, my new phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your doorstep." I opened the door. There was no one there, but a set of keys and a deed sat in a small, elegant box. The deed was for a modern, fully furnished villa in a quiet, respectable neighborhood. A note was paper-clipped to it, written in a sharp, decisive hand. "Little girl, you truly are remarkable. Consider this an advance on future services. DC. Donovan Creed had personally gifted me a villa." My next round of interviews, therefore, took place inside the sun-drenched living room of my new home. The contrast between this and my previous rental was staggering, and the media ate it up. That very day, as I was giving one such interview, the front door burst open. My parents stood there, dragging their luggage, their faces a mixture of outrage and entitlement. "Dad, Mom," I said, cutting off the interviewer. "What are you doing here?" My father, Orion, scowled, tossing his luggage onto the polished marble floor with a thud. "All because of your big mouth. Our house is surrounded by lunatics now. Who else should we rely on but you?" I blinked, feigning innocence for the cameras that were still rolling. But everything I said was the truth. I didn't make anything up. I gestured around the beautiful room. And this villa wasn't a gift. I didn't accept it. It's only a sponsorship, and I have to return it when college starts. Isn't it inappropriate for you to live here? My mother, Lyra, jumped up and smacked me on the back of the head, a familiar stinging blow. "Are you stupid from studying too much? A villa given to you and you don't want it? Too bad. Starting today we're living here and we're not leaving." An idea struck me then, and I curved my lips into a mocking smile. I turned to my father. "Dad, this villa isn't nearly as nice as the Crestview one. Didn't your precious son-in-law buy you that?" My father lit a cigarette, ignoring the no-smoking signs, his brows furrowed in frustration. "That bastard Kalen doesn't respect us at all. Everyone online calls him an illegitimate son. And instead of fighting back, he vents his anger on your sister. You don't even know how badly Serafina's been beaten." At that, my mother's eyes filled with theatrical tears. "Our poor Serafina. She's just a child, and already she has to accompany him to business dinners. She drinks until her stomach bleeds. And that heartless Kalen doesn't even care about her." I answered casually, watching them closely. "Then leave him. It's just an engagement, not a marriage." "No," they both shouted at once. Their eyes darted away from mine, their voices stammering before my father finally admitted the ugly truth. He's not all bad. He promised us $20,000 a month for living expenses." I saw it now with perfect, chilling clarity. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. In my last life they had shoved me into hell for money. And now, for money again, they were willing to sacrifice Serafina's life, to overlook her bruises and her bleeding stomach. They didn't truly love her either. They loved what she could provide. We were both just commodities to them. My parents, as if to cement their place and their newfound reflected glory, insisted on hosting a grand celebration banquet for my exam results at the villa. Their real goal was to cash in on my success and show off in front of all their friends and relatives they felt had looked down on them. I agreed, a plan of my own beginning to form. At the banquet, surrounded by noise and false congratulations, I saw the one person I least wanted to see. Kalen. He stood apart from the crowd, a wine glass in his hand, his eyes dark and cold as they locked onto me across the room. The instinct to flee was a scream in my blood. But with my two guardians standing like impassive statues near the patio doors, I felt a sliver of security. Forcing down the primal dread, I raised my glass toward him in a silent, defiant toast. Serafina, ever watchful, instantly slid into his arms, blocking his view, glaring at me with a venomous warning in her eyes. Even battered and bruised as she was, her face showing the faint, yellowish remnants of old injuries, she still clung to him desperately, terrified I might steal him away. It was pathetic. But under the gaze of everyone in the room, Kalen shoved Serafina aside with a casual, callous gesture and walked straight toward me. The crowd parted for him as if he were a king. I took a deep breath and lifted my chin, plastering a confident smile on my face. He stopped inches from me. He reached out and flicked my forehead with his finger, an intimate, possessive gesture that sent a wave of nausea through me. It was just like in my past life. "Little vixen," he said softly, his voice a lover's whisper that only I could hear. "You're the one who spread the news about my brothers, aren't you? Have you had enough fun?" His eyes bored into mine, devoid of any warmth. "Are you ready to come back to me?" I hadn't spoken yet, but Serafina, who had scrambled to his side, couldn't hold back. Fury blazed in her eyes, though she forced her voice into a pleading, pathetic tone. "Honey, what are you saying? That's my sister." Kalen didn't spare her a glance. He continued to stare at me. "Alara, I've run into a tough project lately. Help me with it and I'll make it worth your while." A cruel smile touched his lips. "I've already placed your favorite bonsai in my home, waiting for you." Serafina's pupils shrank in shock and dawning horror. "The bonsai? It was a symbol from our past life, a gift he had given me during a rare moment of false tenderness. I feigned confusion, playing my part for the watching crowd. I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Vance. As far as I know, we were only classmates. We've barely even spoken a word. I gestured around the room, my voice gaining strength. Today is my celebration banquet. You do realize that, don't you? Serafina clutched Kaylin's arm nervously, her voice trembling. Honey, what project are you working on? Let me help you. I promise I can handle it. Kaylin's face darkened, his mouth twitching with impatience and contempt. With what? He spat, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. No one wants to see that body of yours. What could you possibly negotiate? Her eyes welled with tears as she choked out. Honey, you can't say that to me. Everything I do for you. I'll drink. I'll drink as much as it takes. I'll make sure you succeed. Honey. Kaylin shoved her off again and took a sip of his wine. His voice dropped, but the threat in it was as sharp as a blade, meant only for my ears. Alara, be obedient. Don't test my patience. You know what you care about most. Your parents. Your sister. If you provoke me, you'll pay the price. I raised a brow, my smile never wavering. I really don't understand this little play you're putting on, Mr. Vance. As for my parents, I said, my voice ringing clear, they cast me out for my sister's sake. I cut ties with them long ago. Is that so? Kaylin's smile was a terrifying thing. Serafina's expression shifted, panic flooding her face as though she had finally realized the depth of the monster she had embraced. Honey, what do you mean? Kaylin. She hadn't even finished speaking when Kaylin, in a movement so fast it was a blur, Kaylin suddenly threw his glass to the floor, the sharp sound cutting through the room. In the same moment he shoved Serafina aside in frustration. She lost her balance, fell backward, and was visibly hurt when she hit the edge of a low table. Disoriented and unable to get up, she lay on the floor in distress. Instead of helping her, Kaylin acted aggressively toward her, his behavior alarming everyone nearby. The guests panicked. The banquet erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and scattered in every direction. My father was so frightened he fell limp onto the floor. My mother fainted on the spot. My beautiful celebration banquet, my hard-won moment of triumph, had been destroyed in an instant by his violent public display. The police came and dragged Kaylin away, but I knew it was a temporary measure. He was a Vance. Unfortunately, my prediction was proven right within hours. Serafina, from her hospital bed, signed a statement forgiving him. She was too terrified, too invested in her fantasy to do anything else. Still, the news of Kaylin's violent outburst at the top scorer's banquet shot straight to the trending list, fueling more gossip and scandal for the beleaguered Vance family. I heard through the grapevine via a text from Donovan Creed that the old patriarch Alistair Vance was growing more and more disappointed in his volatile illegitimate son and was beginning to shift his attention to the others. But the scandal didn't end there. Kaylin's retaliation was swift and brutal. He had my parents kidnapped, holding them in a warehouse, and sent me a photo. His message was simple: submit, or they die. I looked at the picture of my weeping, terrified parents. The same people who had beaten me, cast me out, and valued me only for what I could bring them. I felt nothing but a cold, hollow emptiness. I texted him back, my fingers steady on the screen. Go ahead. Kill them. In further retaliation, a few days later he forced Serafina to accompany an influential older man in private, using her as a bargaining chip in his deals. When I found out, I sent him another message. Praise you for doing me the favor. She always wanted to marry for money. Now she doesn't even need the marriage license. A few days after that, I noticed unfamiliar men in dark cars staking out the villa. Kaylin was finally ready to make a direct move against me. But I was prepared. I had my guardians. As long as I didn't step outside the secured walls of the villa, he couldn't touch me. I passed the information on the final illegitimate son to Donovan Creed and gave him a new instruction: protect them. All of them. If possible, I want Kaylin caught red-handed. The war was escalating. The demon was at my gates. But this time I was not a helpless victim in a gilded cage. I was the general in my own fortress, and I was ready for the siege. The villa, for all its opulence, felt like a gilded prison. Through the reinforced glass of the second-story window, I watched the dark sedan parked across the street. They made no effort to hide. Kaylin's men were a constant silent reminder that the moment I stepped beyond the property's wall, I would be his. My two guardians, whom I'd privately nicknamed Stone and Flint for their impenetrable expressions, patrolled the interior with a quiet, lethal grace. Their presence was the only thing holding my terror at bay. Half a month after the banquet, the carefully constructed silence of my fortress was shattered by the ring of my phone. The screen flashed with an unknown number, but a cold intuition told me who it was. I answered, bracing myself. "Sister, please, you have to save me." It was Serafina. Her voice was a raw, hoarse whisper, frayed at the edges with a pain that was more than physical. It was the sound of a soul breaking. "He did it, not me. The video, it's in my phone." She was sobbing, each word a struggle. "He killed them, his own brothers, and he's framing me for it." My blood ran cold. I had given Donovan the information to protect the other illegitimate sons, the ones outside the Vance estate. But the two youngest, the ones Alistair Vance had just recently and reluctantly brought into the fold, had been vulnerable. I had underestimated Kaylin's speed and his ruthlessness. He hadn't just neutralized the competition. He had eliminated it and was preparing to pin the double murder on my sister. "Sister, please." Her voice was weakening, fading like a dying signal. He's going to kill me." Before she could finish, the line went dead with a final, sickening click. A wave of dizziness hit me. I gripped the edge of the marble countertop, my knuckles turning white. Icy fear flooded my body, not for Serafina but for what this meant. Kaylin was no longer just playing with us. He was systematically dismantling every piece on the board. He was erasing his past, his rivals, and anyone who had ever crossed him. Serafina, with her desperate, clumsy ambition, was the perfect patsy. My phone rang again instantly, the screen flashing with a number I had come to dread. I swiped to answer, my voice dangerously calm. "Hello. Your sister killed two of my brothers." His tone was conversational, almost bored. "Unfortunate thing, she got stabbed too. She won't last long." A pause, thick with malice. "What should we do, Alara? You're her sister. Come see her one last time." Then he started laughing. It was a ghastly, ghostly sound devoid of any humanity, a noise that scratched at the primal parts of my brain and made my skin crawl. It was the laugh of a demon who had already won. He was baiting me. The Vance estate was his lair, a place of nightmares from my first life. To walk back in there was to surrender. But he had miscalculated. He thought my weakness was sentiment, a sisterly bond he could exploit. He didn't understand that my only weakness was my own survival, and he was the greatest threat to it. Serafina had a video. Evidence. If I could get it, if I could prove he was the killer, I could put him behind bars. It was the only way I would ever be free. "I'm on my way," I said, my voice flat. That night, I instructed Stone and Flint to follow me at a distance. I couldn't bring them inside. Kaylin's security would never allow it. This was a solo mission. A gamble with my life as the stake. The Vance estate was exactly as I remembered it. A cold, modernist monstrosity of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the churning ocean. It was swarming with police cars, their lights painting the stark white walls in pulsating shades of blue and red. The scene was one of controlled chaos. And there he was, standing in the grand foyer as if he owned it, which in every way that mattered he now did. A smear of blood was drying on his shirt cuff. He saw me and smiled, a slow, predatory stretching of his lips. He reached a bloody hand toward me. "Alara, you finally came back." I didn't flinch. I met his gaze, my own as cold as the marble floor beneath our feet. "Kaylin, the one who deserves to die is you." He pulled his hand back, his eyes filling with a twisted indulgence, like he was coaxing a stubborn child. "Alara, don't say that. In my last life they killed me. In this one your sister avenged me. They owed me this." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Come back to me, Alara. Let's live well together. Once the old man is dead, the Carter family will be ours." The arrogance of it, the sheer, unhinged belief that I would ever want to share that hell with him again, was breathtaking. I smiled faintly, my gaze flicking over his shoulder toward the sweeping staircase where I knew the old patriarch, Alistair Vance, would be listening. "Kaylin," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the cavernous space. "Do you really think just because you were reborn you can win?" He frowned, his eyes narrowing as he followed my gaze. His pupils contracted sharply. From the shadowed landing, a voice thundered, thick with age and fury. "Bastard! Who are you planning to outlive?" Alistair Vance descended the stairs, leaning heavily on a cane, his face a mask of thunder. The Vance family, crushed under round after round of scandal and public scorn, had already begun to collapse. Their business was plummeting, branches across the country were declaring bankruptcy. They were no longer the untouchable dynasty of old. And the source of this public evisceration, the illegitimate son he had been pressured to acknowledge, was now standing in his home, covered in blood, boasting about his inheritance. It was at that moment I knew my gamble had paid off. When I received Serafina's final phone call, I had immediately started recording. I had captured her desperate, damning confession. "He did it, not me. The video, it's in my phone." I had sent the audio file to Donovan Creed the second the call dropped. I knew he would know what to do with it. He would have delivered it straight to Alistair Vance, the one man who had the power to disown Kaelin completely. When the patriarch heard his son, the son who had brought nothing but disgrace, openly discussing his death and the seizure of his empire, the choice became simple. Protect the crumbling family or protect the useless, murderous son. Even with his father confronting him, Kaelin stubbornly refused to admit he was the killer. He was too arrogant, too sure of his own invincibility. "It was Serafina," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger toward the hallway where she was likely dying. "She was jealous. She did it." That's when I moved. While the two Vance men were locked in their confrontation, I slipped away. I knew this house. I knew every hidden alcove, every secret of its layout from my years of imprisonment here. I went straight to the solarium, to the specific bonsai tree he had mentioned at the banquet. It was a twisted little juniper, the one he had given me after I secured his first major deal. A symbol of his control. My hands trembled only slightly as I dug through the damp soil at its base. My fingers brushed against something smooth and hard. A small, waterproof memory card, sealed in a plastic bag. I held the truth in my hand. I walked back into the foyer, where the police were now talking to a furious Alistair and a defiant Kaelin. I didn't say a word to either of them. I walked straight to the lead detective and held out the memory card. "I believe you'll find the evidence you need on here," I said, my voice steady. "My sister hid it. It shows the real killer." Kaelin's face transformed. The mask of arrogant control shattered, replaced by a look of pure, undiluted hatred. He lunged for me, but the police were faster. They restrained him, forcing his arms behind his back. "You bitch," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You treacherous whore. I'll destroy you. I'll ruin you." He was arrested on the spot for premeditated murder. As they dragged him away, his screams echoing through the hall, his eyes never left mine, promising a vengeance that could now never come. 3 months later, his death sentence was carried out. The day before the execution, I went to see him one last time. He sat behind the thick glass, clad in orange, his once predatory eyes now dull and hollowed out. But when he saw me, a spark of the old malice returned. I picked up the phone on my side. He did the same. I leaned close to the glass, my voice a whisper he had to strain to hear. "In both this life and the last," I said, "I was the one who secretly saved your brothers. I gathered them. I armed them against you." I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. "Too bad this time they couldn't finish you off themselves." His face twisted hideously, the last vestiges of his composure evaporating. His teeth ground together, a horrible grating sound. You tricked me," he spat, spittle hitting the glass. "Even in death I won't forgive you. I'll haunt you, Alara. I'll curse you from hell." I smiled faintly, a genuine, peaceful smile I hadn't felt in 2 lifetimes. "Good," I whispered. "Rest in hell, Kaelin." I hung up the phone and walked away, leaving his impotent rage behind the soundproof glass. The demon was finally, truly gone. Before the semester began, I visited the cemetery. I found Serafina's grave, a simple, modest headstone. Our parents, broken and bankrupt without Kaelin's monthly payments, had clearly splurged as little as possible. I pulled the weeds that had already begun to sprout around its edges. Since she had been clever enough to set up a hidden camera, perhaps she had finally gained some clarity at the end. She had finally seen the monster for what he was. The bitter lesson of her 2 lives was etched on this stone. What never belonged to you, the tighter you cling, the quicker you lose it. Better to let go and release each other. But for her it was too late. When she finally wanted to leave, she couldn't. My mother was devastated by Serafina's death, her arrogance and vanity completely shattered. She and my father lived in a small apartment now, supported by a meager government pension. I felt no urge to see them. They were ghosts from a past that no longer had any hold on me. I returned the villa to Donovan Creed, but he refused to take it back. "Consider it a signing bonus," he'd said over the phone, his tone laced with a new, genuine respect. "I have a feeling my investment is going to pay off handsomely." On a bright, crisp autumn morning, he surprised me by showing up at the villa personally, insisting on escorting me to college. A sleek, black car idled at the curb. Standing at the gates of the university, suitcase in hand, I felt the weight of 2 lifetimes pressing down on me. The grief, the terror, the betrayal. And then for the first time I felt it lift, dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Kaylin was gone. Serafina was gone. My parents no longer had the power to shackle me. This time I wasn't anyone's pawn. I wasn't a tool for someone else's ambition or a prize to be claimed. I wasn't the victim or the avenger. I was Alara. Reborn, not to repeat the past but to rewrite it. I looked up at the bright, endless sky and smiled. Power, wealth, love. Those would come in their own time, on my own terms. What mattered most, what I had fought and died for, was that I finally owned myself. And in this new life, no one would ever take that from me again. The university gates were not just an entrance. They were a threshold between the world of revenge I had inhabited and the world of possibility I had fought for. The air itself tasted different here, of old books, fresh-cut grass, and a quiet, studious hum that was the antithesis of the Vance estate's oppressive silence. Donovan Creed stood beside me, a silent, imposing figure in his tailored coat. "This is where I leave you," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't offer a handshake or a pat on the back. Instead, he gave a curt nod, a gesture of respect between equals. "The account is set up. My number is programmed into your phone. Do not hesitate to use it if complications arise." He was referring to the generous trust fund he had established for my tuition and living expenses, an advance on the future services I had promised. There were no strings attached, only the unspoken understanding that a mind like mine was a valuable asset, and he was its early-stage investor. "Thank you, Mr. Creed," I said, my gratitude genuine. "For everything." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Don't thank me. Prove me right." With that, he turned and walked back to his car, leaving me standing alone at the beginning of my new life. The first few weeks were a surreal experience. The sheer normalcy of it was a balm to my soul. My biggest concerns were deciphering a professor's accent, navigating the labyrinthine library, and choosing between the cafeteria's questionable pasta or its suspect stir-fry. I shared a dorm room with a girl named Maya, a bubbly art history major from a small coastal town who knew nothing of Oceancrest's cutthroat elite, of illegitimate sons or of drowned heiresses. Her world was one of brush strokes and color theory, and her innocent chatter was a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my studies, not out of a desperate need to escape, but with a pure, unadulterated passion for economics and political science. For the first time, I was learning for the sake of learning, not as a means to an end in a corporate war. The knowledge was mine to shape, not a weapon to be wielded for someone else's ambition. I avoided the business clubs and the finance circles where the children of the elite networked. They were playgrounds for future Vances and Creeds, and I wanted no part of that world yet. Instead, I found a quiet corner in the economics department, assisting a brilliant, slightly absent-minded professor with his research on emerging markets. The work was meticulous and intellectually stimulating, a world away from the brutal pragmatism of corporate takeovers. Months passed in a peaceful blur. I received sporadic updates from Donovan, delivered through encrypted channels on the phone he had given me. The Vance empire, stripped of its patriarch's iron will and fractured by the very public scandals, was being systematically dismantled and absorbed by Creed Corporation and other rivals. The name Vance was becoming a cautionary tale, a footnote in the history of Oceancrest. It was a satisfying, distant epilogue to the most painful chapter of my life. One crisp afternoon in my second semester, as I was walking back from the library, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a large oak tree blocking my path. My body went rigid, every instinct screaming danger even as my rational mind processed the scene. It wasn't Kalen. It was my father, Orion. He looked a decade older. His clothes, once flashy and expensive, were now worn and slightly too large for his gaunt frame. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a cringing, desperate humility that was somehow worse. "Elara," he said, his voice raspy. "My girl. You look well." I didn't respond. I just stood there, my arms crossed over my textbooks, waiting. He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. "Your mother, she's not well. The doctors say it's her heart. The stress, you know. After everything with Serafina." He choked on her name. We need help, Elara. The medical bills, we're going to lose the apartment." I felt a pang not of sympathy but of a weary, ancient sadness. This was the man who had beaten me with a mop handle, who had cast me out for a monthly allowance, who had valued me only as a commodity. Now the commodity had depreciated and he had come to the new model for a trade-in. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "But I'm a student. I have no income." His eyes darted around the affluent campus, taking in the well-dressed students, the manicured lawns. But you live here. You have resources. That man Creed, he looks after you. A small loan, Elara. Just enough to get us back on our feet. I'm your father." The last sentence was a plea, a final feeble attempt to pull on a string that had long since been severed. "You stopped being my father the day you rented me that room for $200 and told me not to come home," I said, my voice quiet but absolute. "My resources are for my future. A future I built in spite of you, not for you." His face crumpled, the desperation turning to anger. "You heartless bitch. After all we've done for you. We raised you." "You did," I agreed calmly. "And you taught me the price of everything. You taught me that loyalty is conditional and love is transactional. I learned my lessons well. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a seminar to attend." I walked around him. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, a broken, shriveled man in the middle of a bustling campus, a ghost from a life I had willingly and finally left behind. I didn't look back. There was no triumph in it, only a quiet, firm closure. I had drawn my boundary and I had held it. The encounter solidified my resolve. I knew I couldn't remain entirely in this academic bubble forever. The shadow of my past, in the form of my parents or the lingering tendrils of the Vance collapse, would always find ways to reach for me. To be truly free, I needed my own power, independent of Donovan Creed's patronage. I began to use my research position to its full potential. I started analyzing the very data from Creed Corporation's acquisitions of the Vance assets, offering my professor insights that were so sharp he began to schedule weekly meetings just to pick my brain. Unbeknownst to him, I was using our sessions to refine my own understanding of the new economic landscape of Ocean Crest. In my second year, I used a portion of my trust fund to make a series of small, incredibly shrewd investments in the tech startups that were flocking to the city in the power vacuum left by the Vances. I didn't use insider knowledge from my past life. I used the skills I was honing in the present. The returns were significant. I rented a small, clean apartment off campus, a place that was entirely my own, paid for with money I had earned. When I told Donovan I was moving out of the dorm and no longer needed the villa, he simply replied, "I expected nothing less." One evening, as I was reviewing a stock portfolio on my laptop, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number, but the style was unmistakably Creed's. "The vultures are circling the last major Vance shipping lane. It's a mess of debt and union disputes. Too thorny for my taste. But a sharp mind with nothing to lose might see an opportunity. Thought it might interest you." Attached was an encrypted data file. It was a test. And an offering. He was handing me a problem he deemed unsolvable, a bone too tough for his corporation to chew, to see what I would do with it. I spent the next 72 hours immersed in the data. I saw what he meant. It was a nightmare of entangled liabilities and bitter labor relations. But I also saw something else. I saw a route not to salvage the rotting carcass of the Vance empire, but to carve out something new and vital from its bones. A logistics company built on fair labor practices and cutting-edge efficiency, a phoenix from the ashes that would be utterly unlike the monster that came before it. It would be my first company. Elara Logistics. I didn't reply to Donovan's message. I didn't need to. Action would be my answer. I began drafting a business plan, my fingers flying across the keyboard, a fierce joy burning in my chest. This wasn't for revenge. This wasn't for survival. This was for creation. I was no longer the drowned heiress, the vengeful sister, or the pawn in a demon's game. I was no longer just a student. I was an architect. And I was finally ready to build. The end.